In 2021, 1 in 4
Freeman knew what he was signing up for from the beginning. Enough to agree to the explorer's request to grant supervised access to certain parts of Area 51 that were integral to the expedition. Most understood his plight, but still, the U.S. Air Force, the most influential organization when it came to the approval of Freeman's wish, was less than eager to give the go-ahead.
And I pleaded with the Air Force for several years to allow my team access to several archaeological sites. One, of course, is Papoose Lake. That's
Papoose Lake, yes.
Critical archaeologically because that was the last campground of the 49ers where their cohesion failed there. They went different directions in an attempt to escape the desert.
According to The Sun, the Air Force, quote, ignored or sternly rebuffed all efforts by Freeman and his supporters to gain even limited access to the military base. In fact, even when the desperate archaeologist enlisted the help of his congressman, he was still similarly rejected by a reply that allegedly stated that the Air Force, quote, will not allow nor will they ever allow anyone access to the area. Freeman later maintained in hindsight that he had tolerated this opposition and remained patient and calm for a substantial time. He wrote that he was naively, quote, hoping that at some point in time the base commander would call me up and say, hey Jerry, we have a little downtime on such and such date. Come to the gate and our base archaeologist will run your team in there for a day and see if we can locate that inscription. Your research is commendable. Glad we could assist. Obviously, this ideal scenario never happened, and Freeman realized it never would. Well, so much for fantasy, he mused in his Sun-published series, continuing. Now the choices were truly limited. Forget about this critical phase of the 49ers Odyssey and be content with armchair research? Or contemplate the unimaginable, unlawful entry? Freeman chose the latter. The Air Force's staunch refusal did not stop him, and he decided that he was going to go through with the trek, with or without their support. Or even their knowledge, for that matter.
You were refused permission a number of times, and then at some point you decided, to hell with them, you're going in anyway?
I cast reason aside, and I admit it, but I'm not sorry I did it.
There's no better way to understand the trials and tribulations Freeman went through than his own account, as detailed in the Las Vegas Sun series. His first entry is dated Tuesday evening, April 22, 1997. Freeman starts, I stood alone beside the rusted metal barricade, marking the end of public land. An hour earlier, I watched my brother's car disappear down a faint desert track, high in Nevada's Spectre Range. After a quick handshake, Doyle was gone. Dusk was near, and using his lights this close to the border was not wise. Fidgeting with the straps on my 50-pound pack, I convinced myself I was only waiting for the moon to rise a little higher before setting out, when in fact I was afraid. The enormity of what I was about to do eroded my courage. Finally, taking a deep breath, I stepped across the barrier and into the forbidden zone. Freeman goes on to explain that the seventh inscription is said to be carved onto a remote canyon wall high above Papoose Lake. He took the time in this initial entry to explain why he was corresponding with the Las Vegas Sun, writing, I felt it was necessary to establish a link with the media, just in case the wild rumors about trespassers disappearing were true. He also kept a cell phone on his person, explaining that, if arrest appeared imminent, I would broadcast my position and circumstances. In no way would I flee or resist detainment. Reading these personal recollections, it is clear that Freeman knew what he was signing up for from the beginning, and was fully prepared to face the consequences. He made sure to take enough precautions, as he had heard the stories of people entering Area 51 and never being heard from again. Claiming to not have a death wish, he took a cell phone along and promised to leave coded messages of his whereabouts. He went on to say, the base is rumored to be protected by ex-Navy SEALs and Delta Force personnel. Should I vanish into thin air, a victim of excessive military exuberance, the government would have to extend a reasonable explanation. He signs off this introductory entry by acknowledging the magnitude of trust he had placed in the reporters at the Las Vegas Sun, who were, as he puts it, one phone call away from having him arrested. He says his fear dissipated as he strode into the exhilarating but comforting wilderness, and that his first goal was finding a viable water source. In the wee hours of Wednesday morning, Freeman got to work climbing the steep face of Skull Mountain, knowing that a spring sat just on the other side. But then, he got careless, and before he knew it, he was faced with a daunting sight. I stopped dead in my tracks. There before me, swallowing up the entire valley, lay an eerie, strange facility, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Slipping into the cover of nearby cacti, Freeman grabbed his binoculars and frantically raked his mind, thinking he must have made some error or miscalculation that led him to this huge facility. But using his compass to triangulate his position, he came to the chilling realization that he was indeed in the right place. I coined the place the City of the Dead because it appeared to be abandoned, and initially, I could see only bizarre-looking structures and portable trailers. The entire valley was filled with them. With a sinking feeling, Freeman accepted the truth of his situation. The massive facility he saw below, which was littered with guards and occupied vehicles, was like a huge blockade standing between him and his desired spring. At a loss for how to proceed, Freeman tried to get some much-needed sleep in the cover of the foliage. Awakened a few hours later by the loud whirring of helicopter blades overhead, a nervous Freeman devised his master plan. He would pass through under the cover of night. Briefly, he considered backtracking to avoid the Institute altogether, but quickly decided this was the fastest, and therefore only way. Water was a major consideration also, he wrote. I needed some, now. As night fell and the valley was enshrouded in darkness, Freeman made his move. The most efficient path was a straight line, but soon he was faced with the reality that this was easier said than done. He wrote, what would have been a 45-minute stroll became a 5-hour ordeal of heart-stopping suspense. I felt like a bad actor in a prison break movie. Armed guards were everywhere, checking gates, circling structures, winding their way along the dirt roads that weaved in and out of my hiding places. I held my breath as powerful lights lit up the surrounding brush, raced for better cover when they faded. Did they suspect my presence? As he painstakingly inched through the valley, swarming with security, Freeman noticed a particularly highly guarded building. He described that it was constructed of block and surrounded with chain link. He says that a single window, which was too high to see into, emitted a radiant, pulsing glow. But Freeman had no time to inspect the building, nor was that his purpose in the first place. He continued on, climbing out of the desolate clearing, narrowly evading detection by a quiet security vehicle, and ultimately was forced to tread right alongside the paved road in order to reach the spring. But before he was home free, he walked right up to a barricade barring the entrance to the northern end of the complex. Freeman wrote, it was lit up like a Christmas tree and surrounded by a cacophonous din that grew louder the closer I came. The noise was coming from its power source, a generator, a ponderous gasoline-driven behemoth on wheels. Working clockwise, enormous strobe lights alternately turned points of the compass into day before switching instantly to another location. Who are they expecting? Carefully navigating around the strobe lights, Freeman timed his movements to avoid being seen, lying flat when they threatened to give him away, and running forward with all his might when they were momentarily turned. Once he made it through and got a chance to catch his breath, he read the sign emblazoned nearby. No trespassing, violators will be prosecuted, camera exclusion area, badged personnel only, No firearms, cameras, phones, or binoculars. By order of the LANLL Corporation. Only after he later returned home and did some digging would Freeman make a shocking connection. LANLL stood for the Los Alamos National Laboratories Limited. Freeman wrote, "They're the people who gave us the mother of all government secrets, the Manhattan Project, which resulted in the development of the atomic bomb. I shudder to think what these guys were working on now." It was 3 a.m. on Thursday morning when Freeman finally managed to secure shelter in the same old miner's cabin that had saved the lives of the Death Valley 49ers so long ago. He had made it to the spring, and after a night's rest and a hearty breakfast, Freeman filled up his canteens and plowed on. Although he had planned to avoid traveling by daylight at all costs, the unpredicted events of the previous night had left him behind schedule, and so Freeman anxiously walked on in full visibility, fearing the very real possibility of being detected each step of the way. Happening across a sign that read, "Danger, potential crater area, keep out," Freeman realized that he had arrived at an old atomic test center where an underground nuclear facility had once carried out experiments. He hurried through the treacherous area that he knew could give way any moment and cause him to plummet hopelessly down into, quote, plutonium hell. His only temporary relief came from the secure knowledge that no guards would be present in this dangerous and hazardous spot. Noting a peculiar area that lacked any vegetation, Freeman decided to throw some hefty rocks into its pure sand center. He says they disappeared without a trace. As his third day in Area 51 came to a close, Freeman found accommodation in a stranded ship in the middle of the desert. He guessed that it had been a trawler, slated for atomic destruction and post-mortem analysis, before being abandoned for some unknown reason. He signed this entry off. "I spent the night on its decrepit stern. Cruise anyone?" Friday saw Freeman venturing into even more frightening territory as he left behind the dubious comfort of the land under the Department of Energy's jurisdiction and crossed into the Air Force Nellis Base bombing gunnery range. He wrote, "I could feel the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. This was the dark side of the moon, or as one government archaeologist had told me in whispered reverence, the black hole. I had crossed an invisible line into a non-existent area." Freeman says that this area saw the creation of the supersonic Aurora fighter plane, and that it held, quote, the Air Force's fabled collection of alien spacecraft, stored in 9 hangars beneath Papoose Lake's alkaline shore, a top-secret realm, I'm told, bristling with underground sensors that detect an intruder's presence immediately, and if the transgressor is so foolish as to continue, he is certain of a passport to oblivion. As luck would have it, Freeman was soon alarmed to realize that his phone had stopped working in the isolated location. But if he climbed high enough, he was able to send short, cryptic texts to his correspondents at the Sun, letting them know the status of the mission. OK at 50 meant that the first half of his journey was successfully completed, for example, while the word mall was code for test site. He said that while many had later questioned why authorities couldn't trace his phone, the convoluted geography made the possibility of a quick and precise trace unlikely. Nonetheless, he used a rope to summit a nearby cliff and was finally able to touch base with his friends back home. He told Doyle, his brother who was set to pick him up after the trek, quote, "If I was not out by midnight on the 30th, I probably wasn't coming out. I was either lost, hurt, captured, or dead." He phoned his wife Donna to tell her he loved her. She had been against his going in the first place. Then he told the reporters from the Sun, "Jerry at the mall looking for jewelry, the code for the 1849 inscription, at 50%. Low on water, keep the faith." Then Freeman huddled in for the night, precariously strapped atop a narrow ledge at the high summit. Much of Saturday's account is dedicated to Freeman's own musings about the motivations behind his mission, why he had risked it all to come here in the first place, and the intimate glimpse into his mind is intriguing. He writes, "How ironic that 150 years after the 49ers passed, I'm desperately dodging my own country's militia just to see the places where they labored so valiantly. These were not military people. These were not mountain men. They were just people like you and me, dreaming of a better life for their husbands, wives, and babies." Overflowing with joy, he reached the destination of Papoose Lake, which he called the most restricted place on Earth, before going on to remark that the aliens appeared to be in short supply. So were the ex-Navy SEALs, who were supposed to be protecting this place. Nonetheless, he did find amusement in watching a Black Hawk helicopter chase away overstepping tourists in the pitch-black night while he remained undetected. Looking down at the lake, Freeman was overcome with a sense of respect for the struggles of the lost 49ers in this exact spot. He explained, "That innocuous lake bed below me was of pivotal importance to their survival. After journeying nearly 2,000 miles since leaving the verdant cornfields of the Midwest, 100 men, women, and children gathered together here for the last time. Following contentious debate, their remarkable cohesion shattered, never to be mended." The group that stayed, said Freeman, had reported carving the date into the wall of Nye Canyon to commemorate their passage. "In my pocket, I carried a weathered photograph taken more than 50 years ago of that inscription. Would I find it?" wrote the tired explorer, driven forward only by his unrelenting hope. Sadly, Freeman's very next entry revealed that his search had been utterly fruitless. Combing the vast, endless canyon walls for one tiny, presumably weathered inscription was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. He lamented that if he had a larger supply of water to keep him going, he may have been able to stay an extra day and have better luck locating the artifact. But Freeman was an experienced outdoorsman, and as much as he may have wanted to throw caution to the wind and stick it out a little longer, he knew it was time to make the long return journey. However, he didn't retreat completely empty-handed. He did find one significant relic, an oxen shoe. To Freeman's knowledge, only the 49ers had ever driven oxen through the Nye Canyon, and having only seen similar recovered oxen shoes displayed in museums before, the archaeologist was at least comforted by this unique and unexpected discovery.
I'm sorry I didn't find the inscription. I did find evidence of the wagon train, however, and I did get within a mile of the lake bed at Papoose Lake.
Oh, my.
Now, there's no known photograph, of course, of Papoose Lake, except from Mont Sterling, I believe, 50-some miles away. There's computer-generated photographs, of course.
Now, did you have a camera with you?
Yes, I did. And I've got magnificent color photographs of this place. And
what have you done with these photographs, sir?
I've done nothing with it. I intend, and I have a book proposal with the Jeff Herman Agency in New York. The book will be called Forbidden Journey, and I hope to include those photographs, but I will not do so, until I am assured that, and I don't believe they will, show anything that would, compromise national security.
But still, Freeman didn't have much time to celebrate, as he was 22 miles from the spring haven that had provided him with water and shelter. Freeman was starting to get worried. He had depleted his water supply, and his phone battery was dead. With no other choice, he reluctantly ditched his $200 binoculars, phone, an extra canteen, his sleeping and cooking gear, extra clothes and provisions, and got ready to travel light and fast as soon as the friendly cover of nightfall greeted him. Parched and utterly afraid of dying of dehydration, Freeman stopped at the Department of Energy's atomic waste storage yard, where he found a hose on the side of the building and drank to his heart's content. Later remarking at how trivial this thirst was in comparison to what the lost 49ers must have gone through, Freeman shared a compelling quote from Juliet Breyer, a mother from that pioneer group. She once said, "Many times I felt that I should faint, and as my strength departed, I would sink on my knees. The boys would ask for water, but there was not a drop. Night came, and we lost all track of those ahead. I would get down on my knees and look in the starlight for the ox tracks, and then we would stumble on." Compared to this suffering, Freeman laughed at his own experience. He didn't seem to pay much mind to the fact that he had drank water from the hose of an atomic waste facility, of all places. But future theorists would call attention to this detail, citing it as a possible cause for Freeman's health issues down the road. But after some close calls with security, a deliberate avoidance of that frightening facility he had nicknamed the City of the Dead, and a couple wary days on high alert, Freeman caught sight of the perimeter. He wrote, "I just wanted out. I wanted to shake hands with someone who wouldn't shoot me first." His final moments inside Area 51 were pivotal. He knew that he couldn't afford to let his guard down, not when he'd made it this far unnoticed. The border of the government base wasn't the place to relax or get careless. 200 yards to go, Freeman wrote. I crawled and crawled, stopping only when cars could see directly down the wash as they passed. At 100 feet, I took off, with no vehicles in sight. I ran up the hill, not looking back, and threw myself over the crest. With security waiting for me at the pickup point, I peeked over the top and caught sight of a white vehicle. I hid my gear and looked again. It was Doyle. The brothers reunited and walked together back to the waiting car, saying nothing, until safely on public land once again. After a period of stunned silence, Freeman spoke. "Was this a mistake, Doyle?" Raising a canteen in the air, Doyle triumphantly replied, "This wasn't a mistake, Jerry. This was your mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore statement." And that was the definitive punctuation mark on the end of Freeman's incognito mission impossible. In his passionate recollections of his once-in-a-lifetime journey, Freeman had remarked, "If I live to be 100, I will never forget that pulse-pounding night of playing hide-and-seek with shadowy men carrying weapons of war." But, tragically, the world would lose the free-spirited and kind soul in 2001, when Freeman's prostate cancer, which he had mentioned was in remission in the 1997 Sun series, unfortunately advanced and took his life. But despite his days on Earth being cut short, Freeman experienced adventures and accomplished fantastic feats that most people never come close to, even with a long and full life. The explorer told reporters at the Las Vegas Sun shortly after returning from his week in the wilderness, "It was high adventure. I'm lucky. I'm just really lucky." Freeman later revealed that he hadn't planned to go public with his story because of fear over the possible legal risk, especially since he never actually